Danguole Litvinskaite and I first met when she was working in the financial services industry. Fast forward to today, and she has now established a successful practice as a coach, specializing in performance and motivation. In her work, she comes across executives, often women, who are looking for the missing piece of the puzzle, be that a promotion, a new leadership role, or a more balanced personal life. Her passion for helping women has led her to develop a holistic approach to self improvement, and she's now a passionate advocate of incorporating well being and self love as part of the transformation journey. Together, we talk about the heavy burden of wearing masks, the subconscious power of the inner critic, and how you can start to change that pattern by applying some simple techniques on a daily basis.
Is this is really what I want? Is this really what brings me happiness? In some ways, there is almost no difference if it's an executive or not an executive. We are just humans with the same questions, discussing the same topics probably over centuries. It's like, who am I? What makes me happy? How can I make impact? And how can I make that impact with joy?
Good morning, Danguole. Very, very happy to have you on the show today. It's been a while trying to set up some time because you've been very busy traveling and you've been to many places last year. But where are you today and where are you joining us from?
Yes, very good morning, Christina. It's really a pleasure to be here together with you and listeners. Well, indeed, after 2 years of almost constant travel, I find myself in my home country, which is Lithuania in my case. And currently, as we're recording this episode, is actually minus 18. So quite a sight for senses.
Yes. Well, so here you are calling from Lithuania today, and what our listeners will have heard in our intro is that you are a coach. Well, I think there's a lot of certainly misunderstanding about what being a coach actually means. So, do you want to tell us what you specifically focus on?
Yes, of course. Well, this is a great question because, of course, it's a big passion of mine. And currently, indeed, I am a career strategy and leadership coach. I coach corporate employees as well as executives, whilst focusing on leadership as well as well-being. And that stems from my personal story, which I can, of course, share a little bit later. But just to answer your question about coaching and let's say why coaching. Because of some personal circumstances that happened when I transitioned from investment banking to coaching, I was in a process of researching, should I study psychology? Should I maybe go into teaching? Because those were the domains that were very interesting for me. And then I learned about coaching, and I realized that I was coaching already before knowing what coaching is.
Yes, and you make it sound very easy. You decided that you were already doing it. You decided to quit your job in the financial services. You mentioned banking, asset management. You've been through a lot of different roles in there. So, but isn't it a little bit scary? You're starting on your own. You don't have anyone paying your salary every month. It's quite a big change from what you're doing now. And I'm asking this because I often go to events and in the course of meeting many of my peers or colleagues or competitors, if you will, and just other women, mostly women who are thinking about doing this kind of transition, but have a lot of hesitation. So how did you get over that?
Um, yeah, so this would be a good probably place to share a little bit how it all happened because indeed, as you mentioned, I initially chose the path of what I call to a big extent social proof, proving to that anonymous somebody that I can achieve a certain level of success. And at that time, my definition of success was financial blossoming, status. I was also inherently interested in investments, so hence I chose investment banking. After some point, I transitioned to asset management. I was a portfolio manager of emerging market debt instruments. And later I got promoted to be a financial advisor to high net worth individuals. And finally, my last step in my financial career, 13-year career, was in asset management, being responsible for a region where I was selling the financial products. So what's interesting in terms of transition was that at some point I started to get the signals of what I called our true self or my true self, that as much as it's interesting, this career, I stopped seeing the meaning. I stopped being motivated to go to the job every day. And at some point I was in sales meetings, and I saw the connection and I saw the potential of what could happen as a deal in those meetings. But at some point it just started to be, I don't know, meaningless to a certain extent. I was like, what do I change in the world because of that? So I don't know. It's not to say that, for example, sales profession is not good. No, like some people really derive a lot of meaning from that. But for me, it just stopped being the case. And I could feel that from a depth of me, there is something else calling where I would get that sense of meaning. So in terms of transition, it's not just a transition where, oh, I change the profession and status, and therefore I change, and therefore that change is difficult. Actually, if you look at the inherent deep down motivation, there is a big force that's going to move you through that transition. Because essentially I was seeking for meaning. So it's very, very important before the transition to answer yourself the question, why? And so then I was like, what am I waiting for? Really, what am I waiting for? Whose approval am I waiting for? So that was my very big, insightful moment. But mind you, this happened 1 year before transition. But then what happened, and this solidified the transition, at some point in my job, I had like this moment in January. I think this was around this date, by the way, which is very interesting that we're recording it today. And I literally collapsed from physical exhaustion. And I knew already, oh my God, Danguole, you read so much about burnout, and here we go, you are in one. So at that point, I already knew what happened. I knew that this is my chance, my highway to my authentic self, to my authentic choices, no longer driven by social proof, but really a chance to start over, but this time start over from my own desire and willingness and authenticity to build the life that I want to live. So
So
hence,
you almost, yeah, it almost sounds like you needed your body to give you that signal. And sometimes people seek validation in signs and in other things, especially when they really feel like they should do something, but yet they're conflicted because it's a process. And in your case, that was the physical breakdown being the last straw, but you almost took it as a good thing. Be like, okay, now I know that's what I need to do.
oh yes, then this happened. I looked sort of upwards at the universe and I said, I know what you want me to do. So that was the start of the transition. But you know, Christina, you put it very beautifully just now. Indeed, this is what happens. And I work a lot with people who recover from burnout, as well as those who already, let's say, maybe haven't yet experienced but the burnout, but thanks to our work together, we prevented it from happening. So basically, I divide it almost into two parts, where with some we work on learning to survive again, but then we have the intention to move to that other part of the circle where we survive and thrive. And maybe we even seek the validation from others, or we seek the validations from what I call false truth, because we sometimes could be chasing something that actually inherently we do not want, but we devote those resources and energy and vital force to sustain that mask or to sustain that status. And what happens afterwards, that because it's so depleting to employ those resources for fake masks and fake directions, that is what I believe when a burnout happens, because we no longer are capable to sustain that, let's say, fake persona to a big extent. And it also happens with the fact that sometimes we're very much afraid what will happen, what will people say if I change the profession, what about if I don't earn the same salary, what will happen to my family. Of course, there are a lot of considerations there that enter that equation. And so burnout could be this opportunity to ask those questions in a more safe space, and could provide the possibility to rebuild yourself into from a different foundation into the more successful and freeing future, I believe.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly common that I hear about burnout, but also it doesn't have to be, as you say, full burnout. It could be simply having a panic attack, which I know has happened to many of my friends and close ones. And, that's the first sign that you usually start to experience because, as you said, it almost makes you feel like you are dying and you're not. But you go through a very short experience where you think you might be. And then how does that shift your perspective?
So that's like a whole process. And that's why in also my coaching, I really employ, it took me a while to develop this system, but it's a really multidimensional approach, I call it, because we look at the physical level, we look at emotional level, we look at mental level, and also energetic or even spiritual level, to sort of combine all those 4 dimensions into a particular outcome to arrive at the destination where you are your own master of your life, and where you say, oh, wait a second, this is where I'm drawn to. Hence, I see the meaning, I feel the motivation, and I want to do it. So, it takes a while to get through that social conditioning layer into authentic self. But in my opinion, this is probably the best investment one can make in their own life, and better at 40 than at 80,
Oh, yes, exactly. It's never too late as well. But I'm thinking, what if someone, let's say, can't quite commit yet to getting a coach, but they still want to make some steps in the right directions? And you mentioned these kind of self-sabotaging behaviors and things that we say to ourselves. And are there any other tell signs that we have to look out for when we speak to ourselves, or anything else that we should be on the lookout if we are in that situation where we feel a bit stuck? We know that something's not quite right, but we haven't identified yet what it is or what to do next.
Yeah, absolutely. There are, as I said, like generally coaching believes in the answers within. So there are many techniques that we can use, and all starts from an awareness. What's happening? So sort of moving from that automated behavior, let's say, or thinking pattern, to perhaps stopping and just noticing, what am I saying to myself? And it could be even useful to write it down exactly as it comes, and then read it back and think, is this really something that I would like to hear? Is this helping me? Is this really motivating me? And if I repeat this comment for 365 days, how will my year look like? And don't get me wrong, those limiting beliefs or those even sabotaging inner thoughts, they also have a place to be, because at some point they were also learned as a defense mechanism, as a coping mechanism to deal with the reality that happened at that time. So ultimately, it's really that awareness to come back to say, okay, is this serving me? Or am I now at the mercy and at the control of that belief that I chose at some point when it was effective, but maybe it's no longer so?
Yeah. Well, I'm actually very curious because you give all these examples. Like, who are the clients that come to you? And, obviously not specifically who they are, but just what types or personalities, or what problems do they usually come? How does the first session with Danguole usually go for? Someone says, hi, I'm this and this, and I want to work on this and this. What does that look like?
Yes, so there are different types of clients, but because I was myself in investment banking and in the corporate world for more than 13 years, normally I coach corporate employees, and it just happens to be now the case that it's mostly executives or people who are put on a fast track in the leadership aspirations. Um, but that is, as I call, this is the sort of primary objective, to develop that character of of self-leadership and develop their own personalized leadership toolkit. However, then they come to the session. My approach is to, in some ways, audit them via those 4 dimensions that I mentioned, right? Because sometimes, I'll give you an example. There could be some people that come to me and they want to go for promotion. And let's say they might get the possibility of managing a very, very big team. But at the same time, we notice together that they are physically tired or emotionally exhausted. If this is the case, very often what happens is that in theory, the promotion is possible, but foundation is missing to some extent. So in some ways, you need to sort of replenish the energy on emotional side and physical side in order then to step up on that foundation and manage that, let's say, that big team from a place of strength, right? So that typical coaching session, I would say, is where we address those 4 dimensions in order to rebuild or, let's say, re-strengthen that foundation so that then they can live basically the life that we want, be it a promotion, if this is a measurement of success, or sometimes some people are just looking for more balanced, harmonious career life.
Mm-hmm.
That also could be an aspiration, where they've seen it all and now they just want to sort of more enjoy and
Mm-hmm.
create
Yeah.
that
We
work.
forgot to have fun along the way.
Yes, to create impactful results, but from a place of harmony. And now I get these kind of requests more and more. I think we sort of saw a trend in the industry. Like at some point it was, working till 8 o'clock in the evening. If you work
Being
more, then,
proud about it
oh,
almost.
yes, absolutely. Like this was sort of the popular kid on the block. And now I see that people are maybe a little bit tired from that. And they ask themselves more about questions like, how can I still achieve and be successful, but feel joyous about
Mm-hmm.
have energy after work to connect with my kids, to connect with my friends, and really be there rather than being on the iPhone all the time, responding to the emails and being
Yes, and
afraid.
just checking task after
Mhm.
task after task, and in the end, you've done all the tasks, but you're still not happy, and that happens a lot, doesn't it?
Yes, and actually, I remember that we talked with you about this before a little bit. So that would be sort of like a normal coaching cycle to develop the leadership toolkit and sort of build the career strategy so that they know what are the steps and steps to milestones to achieve. But also my new sort of initiative that I want to launch is really this women's circle,
Mm-hmm.
where it's also for women who aspire for self-leadership, but without the, let's say, compromise on their well-being or their femininity, So in a way, look at a career where they achieve success, but not necessarily just doing the same thing what men would do, let's say, but rather really tapping into this feminine power, because in my view, we are a little bit different. And I'm very curious to explore that, where I support women for them to be successful, but also with that feeling of enriched femininity and joy. So this is sort of my new project that's going to
Mm-hmm.
come next year, but I'm already putting some things in place for this to happen. Yeah.
It's interesting, and I wouldn't say it's necessarily a trend, but that's the exact reason why I launched the show as well, was to talk about careers and helping women get to where they want to be, but also not forgetting themselves in the process. And I feel like we need to clarify a little bit what that means. So hopefully you can do that. That doesn't mean not being ambitious and not going for things, but it just means using something else.
No, absolutely. It doesn't mean not being ambitious. Doesn't mean not having your desires and not going after them. No. However, I noticed with my female clients, and this is a very, very interesting question for me. Like, this is something that I would like to look more into. Um, but generally, like, I would ask, what would make you happy? Let's say in this case, when we're talking about women, And they say, yes, I would like to fulfill my purpose and make an impact, but I'm a little bit tired from being, let's say, perfect mom, perfect girlfriend, perfect lover. And I work so hard, but when I come back home, there is so many expectations. And then also intimate love life suffers a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
there are many, many things that happen to play the role. And it was very interesting because one of my clients did the tests and hormone tests,
Mm-hmm.
and she was a very, very, very high achiever, like almost not sleeping, always traveling, always in conferences. And at some point, we did a hormone test, and the homeopath stated that the testosterone level is very, very high, whereas the female hormones that would be responsible for lowering the anxiety are very low, depleted. So this conversation was really mind blowing to me because I was thinking, well, there must be then something more to it. Again, in those four dimensions, looking at the physical, looking at emotional, spiritual, and mental. So this launched my curiosity about this happy woman. What would it look like in terms of, yes, achieving that success, but at the same time minding its own biology and happiness factors so that a woman can almost redefine it for herself. What does happy mean for me? Not what society says that
Mm-hmm.
happy should look like, but what does it mean for me so that we have, more healthy, happy women. Then therefore we have more healthy, happy men. And, maybe the world then looks different already tomorrow and in 2024.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and you touched a little bit on spirituality as well, and wellness, and there's so many aspects that are intertwined. But maybe just again a few thoughts on how through your practice you found that that's important. Why we can't just focus on maybe what people think. Oh, I'm going to only work with my leadership, and that's what I'm here for. And you said promotion or whatever it is, and then uncovering in the process perhaps that it's never just about the work.
Absolutely. You put it so beautifully just right now. I really believe in a holistic approach. I do believe that body and human, it's literally a miracle of emotions, of thoughts, of biology. That it's wonderful to look at it almost like these Chinese doctors, when you go to them, they look at everything. They say, oh, the color of your tongue will tell them how is your liver, will tell them how is your emotional well-being, because liver all often stores toxins, right? Or helps to process the toxins. But also, for example, anger, unprocessed anger could also influence how your liver is doing. So Chinese doctor, when you go to their consultation, it takes just like 45 minutes till they look at every single aspect of you. I believe the same is applicable to also coaching. It's true that coaches can specialize in a particular field, but that does not conflict with the fact that we can look at a whole human being to help for people to achieve real, authentic, sustainable results. So I do see this as interconnected, and hence well-being or self-love, self-leadership. It's for me a vital part if you want to achieve also the success in a career, whatever that career might be. Yeah, there is no question for me about it.
And because you mentioned also working with senior executives as well, and starting out with that leadership, so why do they, you would think that if someone's already at that level, there's probably some confidence, a lot of success involved. So why would they turn to you? And how, also I'm interested in knowing, like, how did you find them in your clients? Because, we didn't really dwell so much on your personal experience, but, how does one build such a network that they can then use in their private practice?
So I was lucky because it's referrals. So some satisfied clients would recommend it to their friends or colleagues, which is very nice. Sometimes what happens even, let's say a husband wants a wife to be coached. Of course, we, from an ethics point of view, this is not possible. However, it's very nice to hear this kind of referral. So this to answer that question, and that first question, when you said what they would turn to me for, interestingly enough, that even when people achieve something that is very, very, very impressive, there could be some topics about the authenticity that they still would like to look at, because some people can achieve via choosing certain types of behavior, but sometimes maybe as we change, they would like to check, if this is still them. And they can use the coaching to rediscover the values, reestablish that foundation that I was telling you about. Because, yes, this is the reality of life, that sometimes we can achieve via our defenses and masks a lot. And then at some point there comes this point, I don't know, middle age crisis or whatever you want to call it, where you're like, wait a second, is this me? Is this really what I want? Is this really what brings me happiness? So in some ways, there is almost no difference if it's an executive or not an executive. We are just humans with the same questions, discussing the same topics, probably over centuries. It's like, who am I? What makes me happy? How can I make impact? And how can I make that impact with joy?
Well, and we mentioned middle age. This is part of why we're doing this project as well. So is there usually a specific age, would you say, when you find, or does it really vary in terms of when people would turn to do something like this? Oh yeah, there's a dog in the background, but we can at least don't worry. I think it's fine. You can't control things in life, and certainly dogs are one of them.
It's very interesting that you ask this question, because I was curious about it as well. I noticed from my experience and from my work that it seems to be around that age. But at some point, I asked myself, is there an explanation? How is this possible that normally people who come with these sort of deeper questions of, like, how can I live the rest of my life happily and with joy, happen to be between, let's say, 36 and maybe 42. And well, perhaps now the listeners will laugh, but I consulted one of my friend who is a professional astrologist. And interestingly enough, she said there is a reason. And she mentioned a particular planet influencing this. So I was laughing because my curiosity led me to this particular answer. So from maybe more esoteric, or let's say science of astrology, they have an explanation of why this happens indeed around this age. My own take is perhaps that in some ways, probably there is a time when we serve this sort of persona, as I said. We are driven by maybe the social proof. And at some point, maybe in the middle of a life, there comes a time when we say, wait a second, let me just revisit, and do some sort of reflections on my life so far. And then there inevitably comes this point where they ask themselves, okay, do I want to continue like this? So, I mean, it's chicken and egg. It's not clear how this thought is initiated, but it definitely happens. And I think it's a great thing, because it's almost like a second chance, to now consciously choose the life that I want to create and experience. So I think it's great that it happens around that age, because we are still young enough to enjoy the
Make
fruits
some changes.
as such choices. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and I think, again, because most of our listeners are women, I sometimes find that when I interview these guests about their own careers and how they changed and how they found their true calling, we often get a bit of a sense that it always boils down to helping others. I don't know if that's just because what's genetically in us, or, I feel like that's what people get the most satisfaction out of. There's always exceptions, and there are other ways that you can get validation. Let's say if you're an athlete, you probably, get validation in different ways. But most of the careers or the transitions that my guests have done have led them to a role where they are kind of caring about others, helping others. So yeah, it's an interesting theme, and something that I'm sure you've come across a lot as well.
Yes, I once read this quote. Actually, unfortunately, I will not remember who it belongs to, so I apologize for that. But it was something along the lines that money and achievements, it's like fruits of life, but family and connections are the foundations of life and or roots of life. Here we go.
Mm.
And therefore, you might be able to do without fruits, but without roots, it's very difficult, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I like this quote in a sense that those people who transition to these professions of supporting each other, in my view, they're transitioning towards establishing connections. So I interpret this as establishing or strengthening those roots, right, in order to live this life fully. And I find it very beautiful because I think also the last few years showed that isolation costs us a lot in terms of our well-being and happiness and meaning. So anything like that's why I'm welcoming so much that the fact that there are so many coaches, so many psychologists, because I see them as this army of goodness who can help people to reestablish, first of all, connection to themselves and others, and then create this interconnected world of supporting each other. And I think that this is a beautiful vision.
Yeah, and I've certainly noticed that. And that's how when I started this podcast project, I kept coming across wonderful people who are doing exactly that. And I always feel like, I don't know if I wasn't looking in the right place before. Maybe there's something to be said about that. But also, I feel like it's just so much easier now. You get a wealth of resource and knowledge, and sometimes maybe too much information as well. That's the other side of it. But I certainly think that if you are willing to work in that direction and work on self improvement, there's a lot more resource out there. So you should be able to find something or someone that resonates with your own views, because not everything that's out there is going to be there for you. You know, maybe some people don't like astrology, they think that's waste of time, or spirituality, you know, whatever it is. I think there's a um there's a specialist for everyone, and that's exactly what I've been trying to do with this show, and just show the wealth of resource that's available out there for when you find yourself in that mid-career point, if you will. But look, for really enjoyed my conversation with you. Unfortunately, we've almost come to the end. I could carry on for a long time, so if people wanted to stay in touch with you, learn more, find you, how should they do that?
Yes, so the best way to connect would be on LinkedIn. So really encouraging everybody to connect on LinkedIn, to write a message if they have some feedback about this podcast or would like to share their insights. Would be very nice to hear from them. And also would like to say a big thank you to you and a gratitude for making such a podcast. I think this is such a wonderful idea to provide the array of resources of what is available so that people can then choose and tune in with themselves by seeing what resonates the most, because there are many perspectives, and if it helps, then it's a right perspective, but in order to understand that, of course, it's good to give it a try. And that's why the value of curiosity can drive beautiful experiences in life. So thank you for creating it like this, because I see it as contributing very much to that vision of people being more authentic, having energy to live a beautiful life.
So this is it, the final episode of this very first installment of The Sound of Breaking Glass. We've unpacked a lot this season, but I chose to end it with Danguole because she set the scene so nicely for what is about to come in season 2. While her personal story of transition from a 13-year career in finance to pursuing her own sense of purpose is nothing short of inspiring, I also wanted us to learn not just from her story, but also from her years of experience in the field of career coaching. So, in this episode, we forayed into the depths of topics such as social conditioning, social proof, the reasons for burnout, and how success, however we may define that, impacts our quality of life. However, my favorite message from our conversation was that we should be creating from a place of joy and harmony rather than competition or striving for perfection. Simple message, yet one that we so often forget, especially when we start focusing on all the other things that we believe we have to do. So these are powerful topics that I discuss every day over the coffee table with my friends, and I know that they resonate with many of you out there. This is exactly where I got the inspiration for the next season. Without revealing too much, because there's a very exciting teaser trailer coming up soon, expect some deep, meaningful, and unhurried conversations exploring nonlinearity beyond just careers. You can expect to hear from experts on some of my favorite topics, including psychology, women's health, interpersonal skills, finding time for the things you love, getting more out of your day and career without a sense of guilt, and most importantly, bringing it all together in a way that reminds us to live life with a full heart every day.